The people you see on screen right now are begging for a miracle. Hunger, thirst, and civil resistance are turning into a revolution. This is the capital of a country claiming nuclear power in the middle of the 21st century, Tehran. Now, this ancient metropolis faces the greatest chaos in its history. Cities are falling, from Qom, Isfahan, Mashhad to Hamadan, even Tehran. Right now, the Khamenei regime in Iran is facing the greatest civil collapse in history. Millions of Iranians are not standing still. They are fed up with the regime. The regime destroyed itself through its own incompetence. It drove the people mad with thirst and hunger. The protests that erupted at the end of December 2025 have turned into a massive civil war against the Khamenei regime. Right now, the uprisings have engulfed more than 70 cities in 31 provinces of Iran. Dams have dried up, major markets have closed, and regime flags have been burned. People are fighting for survival in the streets for a single bucket of water or a piece of bread. In the middle of the 21st century, Tehran is transforming from a nuclear power to a water beggar. The Iranian regime, which threatens the world with its missiles, cannot provide its people with a drop of water in its own capital. It has even started begging its neighbors for water. People are not queuing for free bread. Millions of Iranians, holding cans in their hands, are trampling each other to get plastic water containers to take home. Only the sound of air and helplessness flows from the taps, not water. This is the moment when civilization collapsed. That is why President Mesut Pezeshkian raised the white flag. He said, in desperation, that Tehran's relocation had become a necessity. Iran's impending water bankruptcy disaster has not only devastated nature, but also undermined the very survival of the Iranian state. A rescue operation? No. The solution is the greatest escape plan modern history has ever seen. To take the capital from Tehran and move it 1,000 kilometers south into the middle of the desert. This is the only option left for Iran's leaders. And approximately 14 million people are now becoming water refugees.
Iran's capital is counting down to day zero.
As if all this exploitation of resources were not enough, one of the greatest engineering mistakes the human mind could conceive was built like a dagger plunged into the very heart of the lake, the Marta Kelanteri Highway. This 15-kilometer embankment road, built to connect Urmia and Tabriz, literally split the lake in two. The construction of the road stopped the natural circulation of water, accelerated sediment accumulation, and destroyed the lake's ability to clean itself. Once a single breathing organism, the lake was suffocated by this highway and transformed into two separate dying pools of water. Today, the figures document not a decline, but an extinction. The lake, which had a water volume of 30 billion cubic meters in the 1990s, has now lost more than 95% of its volume. The beaches, once navigable by ships and thronged with tourists, have now turned into toxic salt deserts stretching for miles, dotted with abandoned piers. Satellite data confirms that the lake is no longer a permanent body of water, but only a temporary pool formed by seasonal rainfall. This picture is not a quirk of nature. It is an ecological crime designed, implemented, and completed for profit. The solution is the greatest escape plan modern history has ever seen. To take the capital from Tehran and move it 1,000 kilometers south into the middle of the desert. This is the only option left for Iran's leaders. And approximately 14 million people are now becoming water refugees. To fully understand the situation, we need to talk about that monster beneath the ground. The technical term that the media dismisses as climate change, land subsidence. What is happening in Tehran is not simply a case of there was less rain this year. Tehran is sinking, not figuratively but physically, geologically, and irreversibly sinking into the ground. Scientific data and satellite analyses by the Center for Strategic and International Studies present us with a terrifying, indisputable fact. Tehran is one of the fastest sinking metropolises in the world. Some parts of the city are sinking into the ground at a rate of 35 centimeters per year. I want you to visualize those 35 centimeters. That is hundreds of times the annual sinking rate of Venice. Imagine a building's foundation sinking 1 meter every 3 years. No concrete, no steel, no engineering marvel can withstand such rapid and unstable ground movement. The hairline cracks you see on the walls of the buildings on your screen right now are actually the building's cries. The cracks that suddenly open up on the sidewalks are the ground's way of saying, "I can't carry you anymore." Scientists call this situation permanent compression. Why permanent? Here lies the most terrifying aspect of the disaster. Underground water reserves act like a sponge for the soil. Water fills the soil's pores and helps it bear the weight of the city above. But what happens when you viciously extract every last drop of that water? The sponge dries out, and it is crushed, compressed, and cemented under the weight of millions of tons of city above. According to CSIS satellite analysis, Tehran is sitting on a giant gas bomb ready to explode at any moment. Metro tunnels are warping, rails are coming off their tracks. This is the real reason President Pezeshkian said, "We cannot continue by adding more population here." The infrastructure has physically collapsed. The regime is currently running a global propaganda campaign telling the world, "Climate change has hit us, we are victims." This is a huge lie. It is not the sun that is drying up Tehran, it is rent-seeking and corruption. A bankrupt company closes, its sign is taken down. But what happens to a bankrupt capital city? The answer lies in those long, hopeless queues on the streets of Tehran. Please look carefully at these images on your screen right now. These people are not in a line for free bread. These people are not in a line for luxury electronics. These people are paying a fortune to stand in line to buy a plastic water tank to put on their balcony or in their bathroom. These images, reported by Reuters from the field, are a preview of Day Zero. People know that when they wake up tomorrow morning, not a single drop of water may come out of the tap. No one believes the regime's statements that there is water. Everyone is looking out for themselves. A woman from Tehran speaking to NBC News microphones sums up the situation. "The pressure is so low that nothing is flowing. We haven't been able to bathe for days." When the water runs out, the thin veneer of civilization quickly peels away. Hygiene collapses. In Tehran, sewage systems are clogging and backing up due to insufficient water flow. This means medieval diseases like cholera, typhoid, and dysentery are re-emerging among the skyscrapers of the 21st century. When Energy Minister Abbas Ali-Abadi appeared before the cameras on December 3rd, he was not actually announcing a new strategy. He was raising the regime's white flag of surrender. The minister officially confessed the shameful truth that had been hidden for years to the whole world by saying, "We will buy water from our neighbors." For a regional superpower, boasting of its hypersonic missiles and nuclear program, this sentence was tantamount to diplomatic suicide. The Tehran administration had succeeded in enriching uranium, but failed to fill its people's glasses. The most tragicomic and humiliating aspect of the situation was the address of the door at which Iran was begging for water. The modern Iranian state was forced to sit down at the negotiating table with Taliban-ruled Afghanistan to access the most basic source of life. This situation was the most concrete picture of Tehran's decline and helplessness in the regional hierarchy. So, is the crisis really that deep? Climate scientist Nasser Karami's analyses show us that the picture is not just a crisis, but a mathematical impossibility. Karami cries out the bitter truth, stating, "Iran's current water resources can only sustain a population of 50 million at best." However, Iran's population is rapidly approaching 100 million. In other words, the regime is trying to keep alive twice the number of people that the geography can sustain, using depleted resources. This unsustainable equation has pushed the state to make a radical and humiliating decision. The regime is switching to a system called virtual water import to close the gap. This fancy term actually means the cessation of agriculture. The state has decided to dry up the fields to conserve water and import food for the people. This decision marks the end of the self-sufficient country fairy tale that has been told to the people since the 1979 revolution. The resistance economy doctrine has collapsed, replaced by food dependency. Iran's food security now lies in the hands of foreign suppliers, because a state that has to import water has, in fact, begun to surrender its sovereignty piece by piece. This marks the collapse of the self-sufficient country doctrine. Now that the lake has died, the people's nightmare has begun. The remaining 10 billion tons of toxic salt fill the lungs of millions of people with every gust of wind, like a salt tsunami. Respiratory diseases and cancer have exploded in Tabriz and Urmia. The people are condemned to live in an invisible gas chamber. But the horror movie doesn't end there. When the water runs out, the law of the jungle begins. A water mafia has sprung up on the streets of Tehran. Now let's zoom out a bit and look at what this ecological disaster means for Iran and the region, the bigger picture. The Lake Urmia crisis is not simply a failure of environmental management for the Iranian regime. It is a strategic suicide that fundamentally undermines the regime's legitimacy. The picture before us is a scenario that Iranian officials and environmental experts would dread to see even in their darkest nightmares: climate-induced state collapse. Reports from former Iranian Ministry of Environment officials and international observers reveal a chilling reality. If the lake completely dries up and salt storms reach their predicted maximum intensity, it is estimated that 6 to 15 million people living in the region may be forced to abandon their homes. This is not just migration, but one of the largest demographic displacements in modern history, a movement on the scale of a migration of peoples. So, where will these 15 million people go? Tehran? The capital is already struggling with its own water crisis. Its infrastructure is collapsing, and traffic and air pollution are making the city unlivable. With unemployment and inflation at record highs and a housing crisis underway, Tehran does not have the capacity to absorb millions of new refugees. This situation will push the already existing social tensions in the capital to breaking point, creating an atmosphere of panic that will trigger street clashes and uprisings against the regime. Or will it be neighboring countries? Such a mass population movement in northwestern Iran will inevitably reach the Turkish border. Millions of people fleeing their uninhabitable lands to safer regions, namely to the west and north, would mean a massive refugee crisis and border security problem for Turkey and Azerbaijan. This is a scenario that would upset regional balances, strain NATO borders, and lead to serious geopolitical tensions between Iran and its neighbors. Iran's ecological collapse would become a package of instability exported to its neighbors. When the water runs out, the thin veneer of civilization quickly peels away. Hygiene collapses. In Tehran, sewage systems are clogging and backing up due to insufficient water flow. This means medieval diseases like cholera, typhoid, and dysentery are re-emerging among the skyscrapers of the 21st century. But the story doesn't end there. In fact, the horror movie is just beginning. When the water runs out, it's not just the taps that dry up. The law dries up too. And where the law ends, the law of the jungle begins. A new power center is quietly emerging on the streets of Tehran: the water mafia. Reports indicate that the Revolutionary Guards, IRGC, now control not only the dams, but also the water tankers entering the city. Do you know what this means? Water is no longer a public service, but a weapon. While the regime directs water only to loyal neighborhoods, government buildings, and military housing, it is preparing to discipline poor neighborhoods with high protest potential through drought. This is hydro-dictatorship. Today, in the back streets of Tehran, the black market price of a liter of clean water is 10 times the price of a liter of gasoline. A middle-class Iranian spends half their salary just to get clean water for their children. This economic pressure is rotting society from within. Neighbors are stealing water from each other. Apartment managements are keeping watch over water tanks. A culture that once said, "He who sleeps full while his neighbor is hungry is not one of us," has now turned into a survival battle where people say, "If my neighbor has water, I should have it too." Social trust has evaporated like water vapor. The only thing left is paranoia. What was the regime's response to this chaos? A scientific infrastructure reform? No. The answer was, once again, an illusion. cloud seeding. But thirst is not the only form of death awaiting the people of Tehran. Something much more insidious, much more deadly is filling the void left by the disappearing water: poison. In the published images, we see Revolutionary Guard planes spraying chemicals into the sky in an attempt to force rain. But atmospheric physics does not obey the Mullahs' orders. In air with no moisture, these efforts are nothing more than an expensive and unsuccessful charade that serves only to gas the people. When the wetlands and lakes around Tehran dried up, they left behind more than just cracked earth. They left behind a toxic sediment, accumulated over decades of agricultural pesticides, heavy metals, and industrial waste. Now, every time the wind blows, this toxic sediment fills the lungs of 14 million people in the form of salt and dust storms. Doctors in Tehran speak of a mysterious cough epidemic. But it's not mysterious at all. It's the slow suffocation of a city. The city is becoming a biological dead zone. People are not just fleeing thirst, they are fleeing to avoid poisoning, to avoid suffocation. So what is this relocation to the Makran coast project they propose as a solution for escape? It is a $100 billion fantasy, an illusion. Where will a regime under sanctions, with an empty treasury, find this money? It won't. This project is not to save the people, but to build a sterile, luxurious, and secure bubble in the desert for the regime's elites, commanders, and their families. The remaining 14 million ordinary people, workers, teachers, students, they are left to their fate under the rubble of Tehran. The regime's message to the people is very clear and ruthless. We are saving ourselves. You fend for yourselves. So, what will these millions of people, discarded by the state, do? Will they wait to die in their thirsty homes? No. Human history teaches us that when the water runs out, migration begins. And that migration has already begun. Recent reports published by NCR Iran and images from the field confirmed that a mass movement of water refugees has begun from Tehran to the north to the provinces of Gilan and Mazandaran on the shores of the Caspian Sea. People are renting vehicles with their last money, packing their bags and fleeing north to the only place where there is water and greenery. But that is not a salvation, it is a new conflict zone. Gilan and Mazandaran are already crowded regions with limited resources. The local population has already begun erecting barricades and stoning vehicles in order to protect their land and water from these outsiders arriving from Tehran. Real estate prices have skyrocketed, leaving locals homeless. Iran is being dragged into a war over resources, an internal conflict. This situation could trigger the biggest uprising in Iran in the last 10 years. Because people will now take to the streets not for freedom, but to survive. And there is no police force that can stop a crowd driven mad by hunger and thirst. But the real danger begins when Iran crosses its borders. So, how did a superpower candidate end up like this? The answer is hidden in that white spot on the map. This massive white spot you see is not a geographical formation. It is a biological time bomb set by the Iranian regime against its own people. Lake Urmia, the largest lake in the Middle East, has been wiped off the map by one of the greatest ecological crimes in human history. While the elite in Tehran diverted the water flow to line their pockets, they left behind a 10 billion-ton pit of toxic salt. This disaster has long passed the point of no return, and every time the wind blows, massive salt storms, silently carrying death to the lungs of millions, herald a crisis that transcends borders. What we are witnessing now is a much faster, much more deadly, and densely populated version of the Aral Sea disaster. And the demographic earthquake triggered by this situation has pulled the pin on a wave of refugees that will cross Iran's borders and shake the entire region, including Turkey. Ultimately, the Urmia Lake crisis is not an isolated incident, but a symptom of systemic collapse. Iran is paying the price for a management approach that consumes its resources without replenishing them, sacrificing long-term sustainability for short-term political and economic gains. This price is not paid only in money. It is paid in land, health, the future, and potentially the very existence of the state. Geography is taking its revenge. And this revenge is advancing in a way that is too certain and destructive for any military force or ideological propaganda to stop. The regime is trapped in the salt desert it created. Although humanity appears to have won the war against nature, the loser is clear. A generation has consumed a legacy that existed for thousands of years and left only a pile of toxic dust for future generations. Every speck of dust rising from that drying lakebed is a warning fire echoing in the skies of Iran. And this warning fire is sending a message to the entire Middle East. Your borders cannot protect you. Your missiles cannot hit this enemy. The destruction did not come from outside, it rose from within, from the wells you dug with your own hands. For Iran, it is no longer 5 minutes to midnight. It is already past midnight. So, what do you think about this? Please share your thoughts in the comments. To stay updated on new videos, please subscribe to our channel and don't forget to turn on notifications. Thank you for choosing us.